I never imagined I'd be the one to topple the most notorious HOA president in Crestwood Heights. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name's Ethan Carter, a 34-year-old software developer who traded the chaos of city life for the supposed tranquility of this suburban enclave 2 years ago. I work from home, which means I've had an unobstructed view of the neighborhood's daily dramas, most of them orchestrated by one woman, Margaret Hensley. Around here, though, everyone calls her Marge the Tyrant when she's out of earshot. As president of the Crestwood Heights Homeowners Association, she wielded her authority like a scepter, enforcing rules with a zeal that bordered on mania while conveniently sidestepping them herself. From my office window, I'd watch her strut through the streets, clipboard in hand, her sharp eyes scanning for the slightest deviation from her perfect vision of suburban order. A mailbox slightly askew? You'd get a citation. A car parked an inch too close to the curb? Expect a sternly worded notice. Meanwhile, her own front yard boasted a garish fountain shaped like a dolphin, complete with a water-spouting blowhole that violated every aesthetic guideline she'd ever preached. Our first run-in came just 4 months after I'd settled in. I'd hung a modest wind chime on my back porch, a simple thing, just a few metal tubes that tinkled softly in the breeze. It was a small comfort during the long hours I spent debugging code. 3 days later, a notice appeared on my door, written in Marge's unmistakable blocky handwriting. Unauthorized exterior auditory device. Remove within 48 hours or face a $200 fine. I stared at the paper, incredulous. An auditory device? It was a wind chime, not a foghorn. When I called the HOA office to protest, Marge picked up, her voice dripping with condescension. "Ethan, the bylaws are clear," she said, savoring every syllable. Unapproved exterior fixtures that produce noise disrupt the community's peace. You should have submitted a request form. "But the Hendersons on Maple Drive have wind chimes," I countered, keeping my tone even despite the heat rising in my chest. "3 of them, last I checked." "They have approval," she snapped, her smugness practically audible. "Perhaps if you'd bothered to read the guidelines instead of assuming you're above them, we wouldn't be having this conversation." I gritted my teeth, hung up, and yanked the wind chime down that afternoon. But I wasn't about to let it go. That night, I pored over the HOA bylaws, every tedious page of them, and discovered that wind chimes were indeed permitted with prior approval, a process that involved a single-page form and a vote at the monthly board meeting. The issue wasn't the chime. It was that I hadn't groveled for her blessing. Right then, I decided to play her game, but on my terms. I started keeping a log of every interaction, every citation, every hypocritical move she made. Little did I know that habit would become my weapon. Over the next year, Marge and I clashed repeatedly. She fined me for painting my shed a shade of blue she deemed too vibrant. The approved color was dusky teal, apparently. Cited me for leaving my recycling bin out past 7 p.m., and even sent a notice about the excessive number of potted plants on my porch, 5, to be exact. Each time, I complied, but I documented everything, dates, times, her exact words when she'd deliver her lectures in person. I also started talking to neighbors, quietly building a network of people who'd felt her wrath. There was Lisa, who'd been fined for her son's basketball hoop, Tom, who'd gotten a violation for his unapproved holiday lights, and Sarah, who'd been threatened with legal action over her dog's barking. We called ourselves the Marge Resistance, half joking but fully fed up. Then came Henry Sullivan. At 76, Henry moved into the townhouse next to Minea, wiry, silver-haired man with a warm laugh and a slight limp from an old knee injury. He'd been a librarian for 40 years, and his stories about quirky patrons and lost books could keep you entertained for hours. We hit it off right away. I'd fix his Wi-Fi when it inevitably crashed, and he'd repay me with batches of his late wife's oatmeal raisin cookies, still warm from the oven. Henry was the kind of neighbor you hope for, kind, unassuming, and quick with a quip. Naturally, it didn't take long for Marge to zero in on him. His crime was a row of lavender plants he'd put in the narrow strip of dirt outside his front door. They were beautiful, soft purple blooms that hummed with bees, and Henry tended them with a quiet pride. 2 weeks after he planted them. I saw Marge storming up his walkway, her blonde curls bouncing with each furious step. I cracked my window to listen. "Those plants aren't on the approved list, Henry," she barked, tapping her clipboard. "The bylaws specify only low-maintenance shrubs for common areas. You'll need to rip them out by tomorrow, or I'll have to issue a fine." Henry blinked at her, bewildered. "The realtor said I could garden here. Lavender's hardy, keeps the bugs away, too." "Your realtor doesn't run this community," Marge shot back, her lips curling into a thin smile. "I do. If you can't handle the upkeep, I can recommend a service to take care of it for you." The way she lingered on "can't handle" was a deliberate jab at his age. I felt my fists clench. After she left, I went over to Henry's. He was sitting on his porch, staring at the lavender with a defeated slump to his shoulders. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll help you swap them out for whatever's on her precious list. And I'll get you the full bylaws so she can't pull this again." That weekend, we planted some drab, approved junipers, and I showed him how to access the HOA's online portal. While we were at it, I stumbled across something intriguing. Marge had been president for 7 years, despite a clear 5-year term limit in the bylaws. When I mentioned it to Henry, he grinned, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Sounds like she's been bending the rules she loves so much." In my experience, the loudest enforcers are usually hiding something. He was onto something. I dug deeper, spending late nights cross-referencing meeting minutes and rule changes. Marge had pushed through emergency bylaws without proper votes, hiking fines, tightening deadlines, even banning inflatable Halloween decorations, all without community approval. I started compiling a dossier, dates, violations, evidence of her overreach. I planned to unveil it at the next HOA meeting, but before I could, Marge escalated things in a way I never saw coming. It was a crisp Thursday afternoon, and I was on a call with a client, troubleshooting a glitch, when I glanced out my window. Marge was back at Henry's, her posture radiating fury. She was gesturing wildly, her voice carrying faintly through the glass. Henry stood in his doorway, leaning on his cane, his face tight with strain. I couldn't make out the words, but her finger jabbed the air like a dagger. I ended my call early, unease prickling my spine, and grabbed my phone just as they moved toward the shared staircase that linked our upper units to the ground floor. Marge was ahead, still ranting, while Henry trailed behind, his cane tapping the concrete. Something told me to start recording. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Henry said something too quiet for me to catch in. Marge spun around, her face a mask of rage. She stepped close, too close, and pointed at his chest. Then, in a flash of reckless arrogance, she planted both hands on his shoulders and shoved. It was a hard push, but for a man with a bad knee and a cane, it was enough. Henry stumbled back, his cane slipping from his grip and clattering down the stairs. He flailed, grasping for the railing, and fell 3 steps, then 4 before catching himself with a groan. I dropped my phone and bolted outside, my pulse hammering. Marge stood at the top of the stairs, her mouth agape, not in horror at what she'd done, but at being seen. "Henry, are you okay?" I called, kneeling beside him. He was pale, breathing hard, but nodded weakly. "Just rattled," he rasped, clutching the railing. I glared up at Marge, who was already retreating. "He tripped," she said, her voice shrill. "I tried to help him. I saw you push him." I snapped, my anger boiling over. "It's on video." Her face went white, but she doubled down. "That's absurd. He was arguing about a citation, refused to comply. If anything, this proves we need better safety measures for residents who can't manage stairs." The gall of her excuse stunned me into silence, but Henry spoke up, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I've handled my share of petty tyrants in my time, but I never thought I'd be attacked by one in my own home." I helped Henry back to his place and called 911, ignoring Marge's protest that it was overkill and would tarnish the community's image. The police arrived within 20 minutes, taking our statements and reviewing my footage. Marge's composure cracked as they informed her she was being charged with assault on a vulnerable adult, a felony that carried real weight. They escorted her back to her house to await further instructions, and I could see the panic flickering behind her polished facade. The next morning, I visited Henry in the hospital, where he'd been admitted overnight for observation. He'd escaped with a twisted ankle and some bruises, but the doctors were cautious given his age. As we talked, he told me the DA's office had already reached out, signaling they were pursuing the case aggressively. Word spread like wildfire through Crestwood Heights. By Friday, an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled, and the turnout was unprecedented, every seat filled. People standing in the back, a buzz of outrage in the air. The vice president, a quiet man named Paul, opened the meeting with a grave announcement. They'd be voting to remove Marge from her position. She sat in the front row, her navy blazer pristine, but her hands twisted nervously in her lap. When she stood to defend herself, her voice wavered. "For 7 years, I've poured my heart into this community," she said, clutching the podium. "What happened with Henry was a misunderstanding and accident. I've only ever wanted what's best for us all." But the room wasn't buying it. One by one, neighbors stood, Lisa, Tom, Sarah, and others recounting years of harassment and unfair treatment. Then Paul dropped the bombshell. My research had been verified. Marge had overstayed her term and abused her power with illegal rule changes. The vote was a landslide. She was out, effective immediately. As the meeting ended, Marge lingered, staring blankly at the floor while the crowd dispersed. Our eyes met as she finally rose, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of regret quickly smothered by defiance. She smoothed her blazer, grabbed her bag, and marched out, head high but shoulders stiff. She was finished, though. The assault charge could land her in jail for up to 18 months, and her real estate career, her pride and joy, was crumbling. No one in Crestwood Heights would trust her to sell a lemonade stand, let alone a house. A week later, Henry was back home, his ankle in a brace, but his spirit intact. We sat on his porch, sipping coffee and watching the lavender he'd replanted approved this time, thanks to the new board. "You know," he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips, "I've always said bullies trip over their own feet eventually. You just gave her a little nudge." I laughed, raising my mug. Marge's reign was over, undone by her own arrogance and the quiet resolve of a neighborhood that had finally had enough. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.